Karine, maybe we'll just give 30 seconds more for folks to start. Keep on coming in.
Perfect.
Hello, Bill. Thank you for joining us from Vancouver, cloudy Vancouver. I think Kevin might have a few words to say about that.
Thankfully, not too cloudy right now.
All right, Karine, I think we can get things started. And as people will, as more people will come to join in the next couple of minutes, they'll just automatically be joining.
Perfect. Thanks, Omar. Hi, everyone. I have the fun task today to welcome everyone to this event. My name is Karine Cousineau. I am Director of Government Relations and Sustainability at the Green Organic Dutchman. And I also have the pleasure to co-chair the Sustainability Caucus with my colleague, Stephen Fish from Aurora. So today we put together this event on extended producer responsibility. It is the first of a series of discussion on different subjects, but this one in particular is important as we know that there is upcoming legislation, particularly in Ontario, that is basically prompting this discussion today. Like I said, it's the second event actually from the caucus with Grow Opportunity, the Sustainability Caucus. There are multiple occasions to get involved in discussion around sustainability in our industry. I wanted all of you to know as well that C3 has extended its opportunities of membership. So it's not just for licensed producer, but we also have affiliate members. So if you are interested to learn more about this and want to discuss sustainability and bring up subject with us, please feel free to reach out to Omar, Stephen, or myself. We are all very passionate about the subject and would love to hear your ideas and suggestions. So thank you everyone for being here. I think we have a great panel today and it should be a very interesting discussion.
Thank you, Co-Chair Karine. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this fine Thursday afternoon or morning if you're out on the West Coast. My name is Omar Akile, and I'm the Director of Sustainability Programming and Partnerships here at the Cannabis Council of Canada, or as we like to call ourselves sometimes, C3. As Karine mentioned, Co-Chair Stephen Fish from Aurora and I will be moderating today's discussion. It is our great pleasure to have such esteemed panelists with us today to discuss this critical topic in our sector. But before we give them a chance to introduce themselves, I would just like to inform the audience that we have Joanne St. the principal at GL Consulting, who is a subject matter expert with over 20 years of experience related to environmental policy and specific expertise on extended producer responsibility, EPR. Joanne has agreed to participate in today's session to keep us on track and make sure everything that we're saying is right and correct and factual. Thank you, Joanne. Having said that, I'll now just pass the mantle over quickly to Stephen Fish to introduce himself. And after that, we'll begin with the introductions of the panelists. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Omar. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today and really excited to see how far the industry has come on this discussion. And there's so many people on this call today talking about EPR. So I'm excited in my discussions with folks outside of the industry. They're surprised at how organized we're getting so early on. So I'm excited by that. I'm excited by the potential and I'm curious to hear everybody's perspective on things today. And I really appreciate everybody's coming to it with their own expertise and yeah, looking forward to it. So let's get into it.
Thanks, Stephen. So we'll start right off the bat with Gordon. Gordon, introduce yourself to the audience and let us know what you're doing here.
Yeah, hi everyone. Gordon Day with Rise Solutions. Rise Solutions is part of the EMTERRA group, which is a national recycling company, one of Canada's largest privately held recycling companies in the country. But Rise Solutions has been custom built within the EMTERRA family to help design and operate interesting collection programs, including take-back programs. And we do have a take-back program in place for cannabis packaging and vape products. But the other key area that we've set up is related to the changes in Ontario that we're going to talk about, the regulatory changes. Rise Solutions is a producer responsibility organization in Ontario now for over 100 companies under the tire program, the tire regulation, the batteries, electronics, and the packaging one is coming. So we come at this from different perspectives, both operating a current program, but also have a good understanding of the what's to come in Ontario.
Thank you, Gordon. And after this, we'll move on to Myrna. Myrna, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. I am Myrna Gillis, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of AQUALITAS, and we are a Nova Scotia-based organic producer and processor with a very big sustainability focus. And we were the first clean green certified company in Canada in the cannabis industry.
Thank you, Myrna. Thank you for joining us today. Next up, we have Kevin. Kevin, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kevin. I'm from ND Supplies. I'm the VP of Business Development. And we are a packaging company that manufactures and supplies packaging options specifically for the cannabis industry. We live by the ethos that we have what you currently need, but now we're here to find out what you guys really want. So that's why I think this conversation is very, very important in terms of, you know, where we're going to bring packaging with the industry.
Thank you, Kevin. And that is absolutely a part why many of us are here today, to see where the future of packaging can go. And last but not least, we have Mimi. Mimi, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing here today.
Thanks, Omar. Hi, everyone. My name is Mimi. I'm the co-founder and CEO of SUPERETTE. We are a Ontario-based retailer and have been operating since April of 2019. And we make the buying cannabis, retail cannabis buying experience fun and enjoyable. And something that is near and dear to our brand DNA and our hearts is the sustainability of this industry. And packaging is something that we have interacted with since day one. So really excited to be part of this discussion, provide some of our perspective from the retail aspect.
Thank you, Mimi. And surely now, as the audience has put together, we have a player from every single part in the value chain represented here in today's conversation. So having said that, I think we'll get things started, and we'll start with the very first discussion question, just to give the audience a sense of what we're talking about and what we're doing here today. So with the first question here is for Gordon. Gordon, given that extended producer responsibility has been around for some time, can you briefly describe what it is? What are the benefits and challenges for the industries affected? And how will those changes impact the cannabis sector?
Okay, and hopefully Joanne will approve what I've been saying or will be saying here shortly. So EPR is a terminology called extended producer responsibility. It's been in sort of the lexicon in the space for over 30 years. It was actually started in Europe and has migrated to Canada, but around the world. It is a policy position that is commonplace around the world. And so, but it's only common for us geeky people in this space. It's not something your average consumer will know. In its simplest form, EPR is a policy where the cost to run recycling programs, so think of your Blue Box program or a program to collect electronics or batteries, the cost to do so is not borne by a taxpayer. It's that shift from of shifting that cost from the taxpayer to the producers, under the theory that the producers are responsible for putting the products onto the marketplace. They should be responsible for managing that product or packaging at the end of its life. And so that's the sort of basic hallmark of it, but it comes in a number of different formats. But in Canada, we've all been living with EPR for the past 20 years, but it comes in different ways. It's in a number of provinces on things like tires and paint and electronics. Even the beverage deposit programs that many people pay, especially in BC and around the country, is a form of extended producer responsibility. It's one of the ways that you can do it. But it's a way of transferring costs from the taxpayer to the producer. Now that producer obviously passes that cost on somehow. Sometimes it's visible to a consumer at the point of purchase that you may see, like an electronics charge or a tire charge. But for a number of the materials that have EPR programs in the country, the consumer is kind of oblivious to it. So for example, in Ontario and BC and Quebec, Saskatchewan and Manitoba, there have been programs in place that have producers, the companies and who are the brand owners and the retailers of the products that we all use every day, are contributing financially to the support of those programs. In many cases, it's just a financial support, but the shift that we're now seeing in Canada, and it applies in Ontario, is it's not just paying the bill at the end of the day or a portion of the bill. It is now going to be a movement where the producers or the producers en masse have not only a financial responsibility, but an operational responsibility to operate the program. And that's the transition that we're going to be seeing in Ontario. It's commonplace for electronics across Canada, for batteries and tires across Canada, and packaging is in those provinces. So that's sort of EPR on a big basis. How it's going to impact the cannabis sector? Well, the cannabis sector is so new and is growing so fast that probably the people on the phone are probably not thinking about this night and day. They've got other things to worry about. But EPR is already a business reality for many of the larger LPs. Many of them are already registered with the appropriate stewardship organizations in their province, are doing the reporting and doing the paying of the fees, like hundreds and hundreds of other companies across the country. But where we think the cannabis industry has some opportunities is we think the industry can look back at other sectors, look for opportunities to things that they did well, things that they may not have done well, and use this opportunity to learn and to try to sort of take advantage and see where this thing is going. And because the industry is fast moving and creative and innovative and doesn't wait, is to get there, to get to that place where we all should be at a little bit quicker pace. So we think that there's some opportunities for this sector. There is a part of it that is just blunt. You got to do some reporting. You're going to pay some fees. That's just the reality, along with all the other country producers across Canada. But there is some opportunities for the industry to, I think, leap ahead.
Thank you, Gordon. And I'd like to remind the panelists that this is a roundtable. So at any time, if a representative, after they finish answering the question, we do have a couple minutes for comments or feedback. Now, given Gordon gave us a nice quick overview of what EPR is, I reckon there isn't any comments or feedback for this specific question. Having said that, I will now pass it on to Stephen, who will take us to the next question for Gordon.
Yeah, Gordon, I just wanted to expand on that and ask directly that if the proposed regulations in Ontario really help define and support sustainable packaging, and I wondered if you could comment on, where you feel the cannabis industry is really going to start to feel this, and if what are the risks to inaction around this if we're not careful about thinking about these next steps very clearly as a business.
Yeah, now these regulations, one of the things that these regulations do is in many cases, they're about transference of costs and responsibility. And so they're not something that the regulations define as what is a sustainable package. That's kind of one of the challenges here, right? Some people, the industry is looking for what is the best practice, and that can vary, and that varies really in the eye of the beholder. And packaging suppliers their job is to provide choice for the producers, and those producers make those choices on marketing reasons, and sustainability is certainly one of those areas. But remember, the regulations are not designed specifically to change and make things sustainable. They're really about transference of costs and responsibility. So just keep that in mind. You asked about what's the industry in for. Well, there's going to be some reporting that has to be done. But one of the things that really impacts the companies is this transference of costs. There's going to be some new costs for the province that they're operating in. And one of the things that this new regulation does in Ontario, is in the past, you almost had to be in Ontario to be obligated by it. But we believe the language that Ontario government is moving towards is a situation where it is a brand owner who is resident in Canada. So now you're going to have a situation where in Ontario, the regulation probably right now touches just on Ontario LPs. Now it's going to be on all LPs across Canada for the Ontario compliance. So that's just going to be a bit of a change and something that the industry members and maybe some of the smaller provinces may not be fully aware of or prepared for. So there's going to be a number of changes with this Ontario proposed regulation. And we do have to say it's proposed. A draft regulation was sent out, comments were made, and we're waiting for the final regulation to come back. And there could be some changes. But fundamentally, we require the cannabis industry to assess what they're doing, be able to measure what you're doing. And often it's looking backwards. So many cases, what the requirements for reporting is for a company to look back at what they did maybe 2 years ago. And this is where the cannabis sector is going to be a bit of a challenge. You're going to have a situation where some of those companies who are around today may not have been around 2 years ago. It's that fast moving industry. So I think the cannabis sector as a whole is going to be going through some fits and starts as people come on board, try to understand it, realize that it may not affect them at that point in time, but it's going to affect them later. But one of the things I think the challenges on the packaging side is you've got your industry has a pretty interesting mix of packaging. And because some of that's Health Canada required, it has been, not by me, but we have heard people talk about excessive packaging. But what we've also seen is just a lot of variety. And in the recycling world on our side, variety isn't the spice of life. Variety causes some challenges. So some of the variety that we have seen in the take back program that we operate, where you basically have a container, a container of a certain size, you have some commonality there, but we've seen that container in so many variations that from a recycling standpoint, it is a bit of a challenge. So we do think that the industry has a real opportunity looking ahead to develop best practices. And again, something the Cannabis Council, the industry as an association could foster that type of dialogue. We would love to see more recycled content, especially on plastics. There's still quite a bit of paper in the system as well, and those should have as much recycled content as well. But on the plastic side, recycled content, I think, will be something that we have to see how Health Canada reacts with that. But if we can narrow the range of plastics that the companies are using, that would be helpful.
Thanks, Gordon. I think that's a very in-depth deep dive of what these regulations mean. I see that Joanne has her hand up. Joanne?
Yeah, thanks very much. Just to add to, just to add to Gordon's important points, I think it's really important for the companies, especially if you've got a national footprint or your business is national or even international, that one of the challenges that all industries have suffered from is that EPR is a provincial jurisdiction. And so each province is coming at this with slightly different rules, slightly different definitions of what's captured in the regulation. And they're even coming out with their policies at disparate times. And so it might be challenging for you. And just remember that your reporting responsibilities and your performance obligations, whether you have a recycling rate to hit and whatever the performance requirements are, they are to be reported in a provincial context. So you have to start getting your brains around or operations around being able to report at a provincial level what you sell onto the marketplace in that specific jurisdiction. So really important to start thinking about it from that perspective, and really trying to, as much as you can, even though there are very many similarly defined products or packaging that get defined, but it's important to understand that there may be some variances. The one thing I would say about Ontario that's a very big difference from many of the other provinces is that there is a transition to be had. So producer responsibility has been around in Ontario in particular since 2002. As it relates to packaging, it's actually a cost shared model, and it has been a cost shared model for almost 2 decades or just over 2 decades. And that means that producers are sharing 50% of the bill with municipalities who are operating typically through a blue box program. The first part of the regulation is contemplating a transition where a portion of that bill will continually be moved over to the producers, and their 50% will increase for the next 3 years until it's fully transitioned over to producers. And then on that 4th and 5th year, that's when producers will really own and operate and be fully responsible financially. And that's a real anomaly or a real difference in Ontario versus the rest of the country.
Thanks, Joanne. I think that clarifies some of the dynamics that we're seeing emerge in Ontario and how producers will have to navigate those realities. So that, I think, concludes the first segment, and I think that's a great segue to talk to our very own licensed producer here, Myrna Gillis from AQUALITAS. I believe this next question is for you, and this is a blend of two, I would say. Having set in mind the realities, the realities and the pressures that licensed producers face, what are the challenges and opportunities that manifest within the marketplace, and how do we marry the reality and the ideal in this dynamic marketplace? Essentially, in a nutshell, how are licensed producers managing the expectations of consumers with their brand promises in this complex regulatory framework that we deal with? As Joanne mentioned, you have the provincial context and the federal context. So Myrna, I'll turn that over to you, and
Sure.
that's my thing.
So I think probably the best way to manage consumers' expectations around your brand promise is to be authentic in your messaging and to deliver promises to the consumers about you, who you are, and what you do that are true. We've also found that consumers who do care about corporate social responsibility, sustainability, environmental stewardship are very brand loyal and are more inclined to migrate towards brands that share their values. And so when we look at the regulatory framework is exceptionally restrictive about what you can say about your product and how you position your product in the world. But there's actually a lot of latitude and opportunity around corporate responsibility messaging that can earn really high levels of engagement with consumers and not conflict with the regulations. And so some examples of that, for example, for us would have been the second most successful social media engagement campaign that we had since coming out as a company was on our sustainable packaging. And so we are an ocean sort of based community here in Nova Scotia, and our facility is on the Atlantic Ocean. And so we launched a sustainable packaging campaign about resourced and reclaimed ocean plastics, and so repurposing those. And we also highlighted all of our sustainable packaging. So that would be glass, ocean sourced, omnidegradable, biodegradable cardboard. So you can do a lot of interaction that does not take you over the line with the regulator when talking about those kinds of things. There's also other things that you can do about sustainability messaging and education for the consumers, because that's also important as part of your brand and managing the expectations of the consumers. So whether that is, cleaning up your beaches and communities on Earth Day, or doing videos about innovative or sustainable systems of growing, whether it's outdoor, organic, greenhouse, aquaponic, you can highlight all of those things and engage with consumers. And education around any practice or getting product to market that has a lower carbon footprint or a more sustainable footprint. And that's in messaging also around your packaging, your energy consumption practices, your PPE use, and the kinds of packaging that you want to use.
Thanks, Sylvie. It's really amazing to see your leadership on this on these issues, and it's really. I'm sure there's lots on the phone that are excited to hear that you're seeing some brand traction for those investments, so either through social or through sales. Just wanted to pause for a second and see if we have any questions from the listeners and audience members for Sylvie. And see anything coming in, Omar?
Nope, nothing so far. So we should be able to move on to the next question. 1 minute.
Question, Omar, sorry, you do have a question from Peter Hasing. If you can, I don't know if you have access to the Q&A, but there's a question posed. Can see it now? Oh,
No, I don't see it. I don't see it. If
Okay,
you read it,
hold
oh,
on.
I see it.
okay, there you go.
There we go. Peter Hastings asked, is demand for sustainable packaging currently a niche because of prohibited pricing?
I wouldn't say that the pricing is prohibitive. What I would say is that, for example, there are a lot of producers, for example, that use glass, which is a very sustainable type of packaging. And it does maybe tend to be used more in products that might be in that premium or ultra premium category. So I think that you might find that there's a correlation sometimes between the packaging and the price point of the product that it contains. But when you look at something like the ocean repurposed or reclaimed ocean source plastic, once you get that to the volumes, the pricing, while a little bit higher, is not prohibitive. And I think that when you're trying to exact what little influence that you have in a multitude of areas, it can actually be quite impactful. And so I don't think that the cost of sustainable packaging is necessarily an issue. Also, if you look at things like biodegradable and omnidegradable bags, as opposed to plastic bags, those types of products are actually pretty much on par.
Sylvia, I wonder if you've given any thought to long-term in this sector, if there's really interesting opportunities for collaboration amongst producers with, just the large amounts of materials we do produce and consume and sell. I wondered if you've given any thoughts to that.
Yeah, certainly there's opportunities for collaboration. And I mean, even within, whether it's the National Association or regional or local associations, we have discussions certainly in the Atlantic provinces where collaboration is very common. And we talk about things like potentials on, bulk packaging purchases, because we can get higher economies of scale working together. We've had discussions around shipping, so common shipping to reduce our footprint in relation to things like that, sharing equipment potentially on some of the higher ticket items. So there's certainly the opportunity for collaboration to do that, and it's something that is quite natural for us to be doing, certainly in our part of the country. But we also know the national organization and C3 has been good at having those types of initiatives.
Thank you, Myrna. All right, maybe just a quick, I do see another question in the from the audience, and this is from Rachel. She asked, why do you think more producers aren't investing in sustainable packaging systems?
I think that some of it is just that people have not turned their mind to the value of it. I think initially in this industry, we were so conscious of meeting the requirements of the regulator. So childproof, odor resistant, messaging with certain font sizes and warnings that if something seemed to make its way through the food chain and was, got the green stamp of approval from the regulator, a lot of people just said, well, I'll have one of those, and I don't think that necessarily folks were looking at that. But for us, it was always part of our messaging and our goal. So, I mean, we went, and environmental stewardship at every component of what we were doing was part of it. So it seemed like a pretty natural progression for us. And there are others that are doing this as well. I mean, there's lots of producers, I think, that, that have started to turn their mind to this more, in part because the consumer is demanding it. And I think because of that, people are, starting to understand and appreciate what people were looking for. And I think that the first lens, if you want to say what people looked through, was purely on compliance and who was producing compliant packaging. I mean, the packaging that we brought to market, it took us a year to do that, working with a manufacturer. It took us going out and saying, can you get a more friendly source of packaging? And if you do, we will buy it from you. And we believe others will too. So, there is a level of initiative, and perhaps it was a bandwidth issue, for some companies, that they just didn't have the bandwidth to prioritize this. But for us, it was a pretty significant part of what we were trying to accomplish. So I think that's probably some of what the contributing factors were.
Thanks, Mana. There are some other questions coming in from the audience, but I do believe some of them might be better geared towards the next segment. Having said that, oh, Kevin has his hand up. Kevin.
Sorry. Hi, Myrna. I just had a quick question. First of all, congratulations on making that happen. It's a great accomplishment, and it's a good way to lead the sustainable packaging within the industry. We actually, had a conversation with similar manufacturers, and we ran into an issue where it was about compliance, and where reclaimed ocean plastic might have might be leaching some chemicals out and things like that, which would have caused some hurdles to overcome with Health Canada. How were you able to overcome that?
We were able to overcome that. There were a couple of things, and that's why it took over a year to do this, right? I mean, you had to, so first of all, on Ocean Works and on the reclaimed plastic, there's actually a grading system. So you have everything. So the first thing on the leaching is that it generally, that degrading happens in the lower quality, sometimes single-use plastic. So you have to cull from the material what would be food grade material. So the first is that there's 3 gradings that it goes through. So it has to meet the highest grading standard. And then for leaching, there were studies done and stability studies done to measure that, just in the same way that they would do with tin cans for Coca-Cola and other things that have liners or things in a packaging. So it had to go through that process as well. So there was the grading, then there was the stability, and then there was determination of whether or not there was leaching in that particular packaging. So it was something that we did have to go through, but it met all of the standards. It met all the childproofing standards, had all of the related certificates, as well as the food grade certificates that you would find on any of the other packaging that you might get here. And we're really happy to see that there's been a real uptick in that packaging in food, not just in relation to the cannabis industry. So I think it's a really wonderful initiative, but you're absolutely right. Those were things that we had to go through, and that's why that packaging wasn't turned in 6 months. It was turned in closer to 18 months because it took that long.
Great, thank you, and thank you for setting the precedence.
Well, do our best.
We all trying to. That's why we're all here.
Exactly. I think we'll be able to. Oh, Joanne, did you have a quick remark? Because we just conclude this segment.
I know you want to move on to the other segment, but I just want to sort of make the point for the members of the supply chain and the industry that are the audience as well to although all of these sustainability initiatives are absolutely critical, and I would say things like including post-consumer cycle content of discarded plastics is probably the holy grail of all things that you can do in terms of impacts, but just to sort of set the record straight and to make sure that people are thinking about it in the context of extended producer responsibility. Unfortunately, governments haven't found, let's call it a fair way to integrate credits or even reductions in costs for companies who are able to include PCR, post-consumer cycle content in packaging. So keep doing it. Absolutely, find some ways of doing it more. Just know that as it relates to EPR, that you may not get the kind of credit or maybe even recognition in the policy, the way that the policy works. So one of the things I would shout out to all of you that are making decisions on packaging choices now is, whether those packaging can successfully be collected and most importantly, recycled in the systems across the country, because that's what sort of dictates, whether you're able to claim it towards your performance requirements. So recyclability is a really important design feature that all of you have to think about as you make your purchasing choices and as you're making these discussions with your packaging suppliers.
Thanks, Joanne. That really clarifies things. Myrna, did you want to just give a closing remark for this?
Yeah, I mean, I think overall, I mean, from an LP perspective, I think the important thing that we need to continue to do from a packaging and an environmental stewardship perspective is we need to continue to innovate and we need to continue to advocate. And so, I think that the regulator imposes a lot of restrictions which actually dictate the requirement of packaging that may be excessive to accommodate messaging and some of the things that are with it, or package sizes, same size package with 10 gummies in it with 10 milligrams as it is with one, and it's not like the economies of scale are there. So, I mean, shipping out 30 packages of something, a single unit, it really just intuitively seems wrong. So I think that I think there's a lot of LPs out there doing some great work, and I think we just need to continue to innovate and advocate with our regulator. And we have to be mindful of the provincial and federal requirements for having packaging that can be used again, and also be mindful, sometimes some of the things that we do aren't so sexy because we try to pick things that are easy to recycle, like white containers, as opposed to black containers or other things. So, I think there's lots we can do and we'll continue to do. And this is a really exciting initiative to be a part of.
Thank you, Marina. All right, I will now pass it back to Stephen to kick us off on the next segment.
Thanks very much, Omar. Kevin, I wanted to bounce things over to you for a second to get your perspective on what you're hearing from your clients in the cannabis industry. And specifically, I'm interested in the intersection between this conversation that they're hearing from consumers that they need to be more sustainable, they need to be reflecting that in their packaging. But they're also coming at you with, but I've got freshness concerns, I've got, safety concerns, and I've got multiple jurisdictions that I'm trying to do it in. Tell me the secret sauce. What's the arithmetic? How are you doing this dance right now? And what are you hearing from your partners?
Well, unfortunately, there is no secret sauce. We're still in the process of creating that recipe, but with the initial rollout of legalization, it didn't leave us a lot of room or a lot of space for innovation or anything like that. I think initially, because everybody was so tied up financially, there wasn't a huge budget for packaging, right? And packaging was kind of even more of an afterthought, really, where everybody was scrambling to produce and everybody was scrambling to get product out on the shelves. Packaging was kind of left to the last minute, right? So when people look at packaging, I think most people gravitated to plastics or Mylar bags due to cost. It's easy to label, easy to roll out, and they weren't really looking at preserving the product. I mean, we have humidity packs out there that do help in a way, but overall, I mean, if you're curing your products right and you put it in a container, there is the off-gassing and things like that you have to consider. So, in the beginning, I don't think there was a lot of thought put into it. And now that we're having these discussions and sustainability is being put more into the forefront, we're able to kind of strategize and figure out a way that can really, really help benefit the plant, as well as stay true to the branding for LPs, right? Because like Myrna said, the current packaging is not sexy at all. It's really hard to differentiate brands on the shelf when they're all either black bags or black bottles or white jars or white bottles, right? We're starting to see some color included into it, and but it's hard to define your brand without excessive packaging, right? A good example was the house plant. It comes in that big VHS kind of case, and he got a lot of feedback about that. But at the same time, if you took a look at it from a marketing perspective, it does stand out. So it is kind of like an uphill battle for producers and branding and things like that. And I think that's posed a huge challenge for the industry, where you're trying to kind of please everybody, but there's no way to actually do that.
Okay, I think that's a good starter for the segment. I think maybe, or unless Stephen, if you wanted to ask a specific question, I was going to follow up.
Actually, I wanted to jump on something. I see it coming up in the questions around black plastic, and it's just sort of that. It's just a question that comes up all the time. I even continue to research jurisdictional changes in black plastic policy, like last week. So maybe Joanne, if you wouldn't mind kicking us off, and Kevin, if you have other anyone who could chime in on the black plastics issue, it'd be really helpful to clarify that for our audience, I think.
Yeah, I've got Paulina and Gord here who, operate facilities that can certainly talk to you about pains of black
got its hand up. Okay, great.
And the reality of it, but can you hear me okay? Yeah, I'm not muted, am I? the issue around black plastic, and just to make everybody feel better, many industries are dealing with this issue. So you're not alone. The issue is sortability. So it's not that black plastic, because it's black, can't be recycled. It's because it can't be seen on a conveyor belt, which is exactly the same color. It can't be identified and pulled off easy. So that's the very high level short description of it, although there's lots of work being done and there is some successes. The problem is that when you commingle something like black plastic with other plastics and it comes through in such volume and it has to be sorted at such pace, it's very difficult to manage it as a separate stream. What I would say to you though is what's kind of interesting, and I was chomping at the bit to say this from the beginning about your industry, is that you are up and coming. You're very young in terms of your entrance points into the market, and you're kind of niche in the sense that at this point in time, you're not really a boutique-y kind of network. And you're all, for the most part, selling similar kinds of products, which is unlike many other industries. The only one I would compare it to, and I'm sorry to be cheeky about this, is really the alcohol industry, the beer industry. I mean, there are a lot of parallels. And if you'll notice, they manage their containers away from the commingled blue box for a reason. They're able to put there's economic reasons, but they have lots of controls and successes and very high recovery rates, and have chosen, as Gord has opened with, to say that they've chosen deposit return as their mechanism in order to get those containers back and keep those high return rates. But they work collaboratively as an industry, and they dare I say, they even have an industry standard bottle, which we as consumers, we want the beer. We don't care that it's in a brown bottle. The brown bottle may not have the same recyclability as clear glass. And in fact, in the marketplace, that's somewhat true. But because I've learned as a consumer to want the beer, not the container. And I think this industry may want to open up their minds to that idea. So if black plastic services you in a way, you have take back provisions or experiences that you're already in your 3 or 4 years of existence learning to work with. Reverse logistics is not something that is, it's possible for you to think about. And I think you have already loyal customer base that may actually be interested in participating in those programs. So I would say to you, think not just about the plastic type, but maybe the universality, the boutiqueness, and the interesting niche that you come at as an industry to go to think about what are the kinds of different ways we can manage our packaging that maybe isn't curbside.
Joanne, thank you for that. I think that primer clears up some issues or some confusion around black plastic. Gordon, I see your hand is up. And if you, I did have one more question for Kevin. So Gordon, if you want to go ahead and just
very quickly.
Off.
Yeah, just very quickly, just as Joanne said, the black plastic is recyclable, and we are recycling it now. The challenge is sometimes it's the resin type and the color, which is part of the challenge. So there are ways that you can incorporate black plastic into optimal best practices. But it is one of those things that happens in the recycling industry from time to time. What's recyclable and what's not. Black plastic is recyclable. It just becomes a bit of a challenge in some sorting facilities, as Joanne said. So
thank you.
It's also a way that you can incorporate recycled content as well. That's where a lot of recycled plastics get into grays and blacks.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think majority of people gravitated towards black plastic just to kind of differentiate themselves from a more medical kind of look. Unfortunately, the default right now is black and white. We're starting to see a little bit more color coming in, which is great. But when, like I said, in the original rollout, everybody was scrambling just to put something in a jar, and the previous colors, the most available colors were black and white. So like when you take a look at a white jar, it looks a little bit more like like a pharmaceutical type packaging, where I think most brands wanted to get something different and kind of like put themselves out there, and everybody chose black. So but I'm glad to see a little bit more color popping in now with colored glass, and like I think Flower did a great job with their translucent blue jar. I think that's a great look. T got as well with that leaning jar. That's fantastic. Very good looking jar. I'm looking forward to working with brands to bring more of that out to the market and really kind of showcase what cannabis and the industry can really do. if we had the same kind of leeway as the alcohol industry, just imagine what we can do. The imagery, you know, like, and you know, just the creativity sparked by cannabis. It's all out there for us for out there to explore. We just need to kind of get the okay.
Well, Kevin, you answered my question. I was going to ask you, you know, how do we get to that standardized? How do we cross the threshold? And if the goal is to make sustainable packaging the norm and everything else an exception, how do we transition towards a standardized environmental criteria for procurement requirements that actually makes sense for the supply chain, right? Logistically, financial, operational, and reputational. And I think you kind of answered that question, but in the interest of time, I'm going to give you maybe 30 seconds to wrap us up, and we're gonna move on to the last segment. Yeah.
Right. I think, you know, overall, the best thing to do really is to talk to all the stakeholders involved. I mean, it's really hard for us to really tell people what they want when it's much more productive when we all talk about what everybody wants and then, you know, strategize how to make that happen. And, you know, we're going to need Health Canada at that table too, because, you know, ultimately everything has to be passed by them. So, you know, to have, you know, retailers talk, who is, you know, like the point of contact with consumers, and then producers who are actually putting their product into these jars, to have that conversation together and to really formalize a strategy. I think that's the way to go, right? There's no real one way right now. It's kind of all over the place. And we really kind of need to dial that in to really find success within the industry.
Absolutely. That's a perfect way to end that segment. And I really think here we'll take on to our last segment of today's roundtable. I do have a couple of questions in the audience for you, Mimi, but I'm just going to start really quickly with a question that we had in mind. And I'm just going to combine two here. Looking back on the take-back programs that have passed to your store, what were, you know, some of the successes and failures of these programs, in your opinion, in relation to the opportunities and the role that education has to play? But looking at EPR that's already in BC, and Ontario is now following suit, and the introduction in Alberta is coming very soon, do you see a viable avenue towards a national take-back packaging program? And how can we ensure that consumers participate in these take-back programs? Do we need incentive, deposits, loyalty program, prizes? And I know that's a very loaded two-part question, but Mimi, the floor is all yours.
Awesome. Thanks, Omar. Lots to unpack there. No pun intended. So I'll do my best to try to run through some of my thoughts with regards to all of this. You know, retailers do play a critical role in the cannabis ecosystem. I think it's great to see suppliers and licensed producers having these conversations, but none of that actually happens until the customer has a product in their hand, and what do they do after that? And so, you know, being that point of contact and that point of interaction where we can relay a lot of this messaging, what consumers can and cannot do, it is, I believe, retailers, it is our job to support in that messaging as well. What we've seen in our experience with some of the recycling programs of the past, and we've seen several large scale ones, is that consistency is really key. And so, say, for example, one of the biggest programs that did launch and that SUPERETTE was a participant of was the TerraCycle and Canopy recycling program that was specific to flower packaging. And, you know, gathering feedback from our team and for our customers, this was a huge success for all intents and purposes. We were able to generate a lot of conversation, raise a lot of awareness, and really have a call to action to this industry. We took it upon ourselves to increase the potential for conversation by also tying it with another social initiative, which allowed for people, for us to match cannabis package recycled with a food can donation, which kind of gave it some extra juice in that messaging. But ultimately, what we got out of that was that customers are in fact really keen on being able to do better. And I think this validates the point in why we're having this discussion in the first place, since we're not just like asking questions in the chamber and saying like, oh, do you think people are going to want this? It's like, no, we've proven that, we've seen that people do actually want this. And then the problem became, you know, because there was a singular entity, I think, that was bearing most of the cost for that, you know, that also wasn't sustainable. And so when that program essentially ended, it kind of left everyone in limbo. It left retailers in a limbo, it left customers in a limbo. And then, you know, similarly, you know, we've seen other programs related to the take back of vape cartridges, vape batteries. And again, an amazing initiative, but then now the feedback is, well, where can the one-stop place be to bring everything. You know, I consume across the different formats. Where can I bring all my packaging to one spot and know that it will be taken care of? So, you know, to your point about, you know, is there a potential for a national program? You know, I'm not the expert on the logistical side of things. I think if it was possible, that would obviously be fantastic. There's a part of me that also do see the challenges from the regulatory standpoint as well. You know, there are a lot of things that are preventing the cannabis industry from partaking some of the great ideas that might be adopted from other industries. Joanne, you were talking about the standardized beer bottles. You know, if this industry was able to slap any sort of creative labeling they want on a white package, I think a lot of these conversations wouldn't be happening, because then brands would actually be expressing themselves the way they want to. However, by virtue of the current regulations in place, that is not possible. And so, you know, licensed producers are having to compromise between how their brand shows up with the potential, you know, sustainability of those decisions. And so it will be interesting to see if and when those types of regulations change from a Health Canada standpoint, any sort of flow through changes from a provincial and municipal standpoint. I also believe that, you know, there could be creative ways to interact between a broader national program and, you know, how, you know, even singular individual retailers can have its own loyalty program for whatever reason, or for whatever approach to really enhance the conversation right off the jump. Again, I do believe that as participants of the cannabis industry, we are all stewards of the plant and we all have our own responsibility. And so if I can take a step back and, you know, take it to a relevant anecdote, us as a retailer identified an opportunity to lower our environmental footprint with shopping bags. Every single retailer has to end their purchase with a customer with their product leaving in a shopping bag. And so we did the work and spent several months sourcing a supplier actually in New Zealand so that we can have fully biodegradable shopping bags. That was an initiative that we took upon ourselves. And our hope was that that could, you know, set an example of sorts and hopefully lead the way. I think every participant across every piece of the value chain has the opportunity to do this as well. So Myrna, a huge kudos to you and the efforts that you've taken, and everyone else on this panel as well for the efforts that they have to end up in.
Mimi, I just wanted to follow that up. I mean, you and your team have an incredible pulse on the consumer experience and what they're asking at the point of sale. I just wondered if you could talk to us a little bit about what kind of questions you're getting about consumer packaging, about the related recycling programs, what sort of depth of information are consumers asking, and what kind of pressure do you feel that that's put on you as a retail chain owner to step up your efforts even further, for example? I'm just curious if you could kind of give that really consumer-centric view for us that I know you have.
For sure. I think that consumers, whether they are cannabis consumers or consumers at large of other products, are becoming more conscious about their environmental impact and what they are buying. And so what we've seen is that these are conversations that consumers actually want to have. And so, you know, when our doors were still open in pre-COVID world, we would have essentially sustainability check marks beside products that would have biodegradable packaging, for example. You know, it all goes into the education piece in helping inform our consumers as to what's available at hand. And I think, you know, that kind of really goes back to that, the benefits of a retailer and being able to provide that constant feedback loop between what is the consumers asking for, what are they looking for, what is helping drive their buying decision, and how does that ultimately impact the licensed producer and the choices that they make. I would also say that in Ontario specifically, and I know this is relevant to a lot of the other markets, there is an additional challenge of that, you know, us as a retailer cannot, you know, readily make a commercial relationship with a licensed producer to buy a product directly. There still is a government interface and intermediary that somewhat limits a lot of these conversations. But, you know, back to the whole, you know, advocating or regulators, I think this is an important piece of the conversation. And I would say in terms of pressure on the retailers, we do feel that. There are customers who don't recognize or understand that, by the time that the products get to our store, like, that's just what it is. It's a finished good. We can't touch it. We can't change it. It is what it is. I think that we have come a long way in setting those expectations in the consumer's eye as to, what the retailer is responsible for. But I also think that customers' expectations are actually increasing over time as they become more discerning as to who they support and how they can vote with their dollars.
Thank you, Mimi. I think you answered even some of the questions we have from the audience, talking about the demand and the feedback that you're hearing from cannabis consumers about seeing more sustainable packaging and that influencing the brands that they buy. And I think as a whole, the supply chain has to find a way to leverage the consumer interest and demand into creating systemic and structural change in regards to packaging. And I think you've given us a really good feel for what consumers are looking for what they're feeling. We had a question from George in regarding to chipping related packaging. And I can see that Kevin has answered that question, but maybe I'll just present this real quickly. And regarding the chipping related packaging, have counts per case been considered by the distributors provinces with sustainability in mind? There must be a chipping packaging sweet spot that would serve the retailers. And Kevin has noted that they currently chip most of their packaging in cases of 12 within a master case. And there's been an increased demand to have these containers delivered ready to fill and put back in the same box to be shipped out to distributors. So as a retailer, Mimi, do you think that we can start the solutions from that standpoint, or do you think we'll have to go back to the consumer and work on leveraging their expertise?
So ultimately, I think that if there's a program in place, if we can act on it, then that's something we can all work together to ensure its success. And so if there is a potential for us to take these packages back in a standardized case or whatnot, and we have somewhere to ship it, I think that's a very valid conversation to be had. Right now, there has been no consistency in programs, no consistency in how we're treating different formats and the different packages. And so, even as an industry, we think about what those best practices could look like. This might be my marketing side of my head, turning on, but it's like, if there is just like a FAQ or a website that everyone, whether you are an operator across whatever part of the value chain or you're a consumer, you can just go there and say, like, what are the expectations? What I can or cannot do? Can I just go to any retailer and give my packaging, or is it specific retailers? I would encourage this panel and this group to be really active with retailers, because we are a very diverse group, but we do represent a lot of touch points across all markets. And it's powerful to have those touch points. So activate us. I believe I'm not the only one out there from a retailer standpoint that would be very happy to have these conversations.
And that brings us to all the time that we have today. Thank you, Mimi. Thank you, Myrna. Thank you, Gordon. Thank you, Kevin. And special thank you to Stephen and Karin, and as well as Joanne. I'm just gonna get Karin to come back online just briefly. And I think coming up at the 58th minute mark here, I want to just say a couple words. Thanks again to all our panelists here today. I think the roundtable discussion has laid the first steps for the ongoing dialogue as the extended producer responsibility legislation and regulation continue to evolve in Ontario. What we're hoping to do with the Sustainability Caucus is to maintain this dialogue at least over the next the following coming months. But I would just like to give a note to everybody who is watching and in participation here today that the Sustainability Caucus is a free open access forum. It is meant for all segments of the industry, as well as folks from here and abroad. If this is your first time, well, thank you for joining us. If you are joining us from our first inaugural session back in January, it's a pleasure to have you here. And I just think on that, we have 1 minute left. So I That's it. That's all we have for today, folks. That's everything. I just want to, once again, give a special thank you to all the panelists who have dedicated their time today to join us. I know it's Thursday, that's just one day away from Friday. So many of you surely must have plans and you just want to go get a head start on them. So having said that, I will just now close this session, and we'll be following up with all the attendees with an email and a follow-up for some feedback, as well as the details of our next session. Having said that, Karin, do you want to close us off?
Thank you. I think that was great. Lots of food for thought from every panelist and good questions from the audience. So looking forward to having more of these conversations. I think those are so important to advance our industry.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, that's all, folks. Have
Bye.
yourself a great day.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank you, everybody.